The bullet tore through the window merely 3 inches from Captain Kira Simmons's head, sending a shower of glass shards that sparkled like precious stones in the harsh Afghan daylight. Operating on pure reflex, she hit the floor, her hand instinctively reaching for the weapon she technically shouldn't possess. The forward operating base around her instantly descended into pandemonium. Someone's voice pierced the air, screaming warnings about a sniper in the surrounding hills. A second round cracked through the atmosphere, and Lieutenant Morrison, who had been standing precisely where Kira was positioned just moments before, crumpled to the ground with a fatal wound through his neck. His blood began spreading across the operations center floor, creating a crimson pool that caught the reflection of the fluorescent lighting overhead. Looking through the destroyed window, Kira could observe the entire base personnel desperately seeking shelter. Military personnel were throwing themselves behind protective barriers, vehicles were veering wildly off their paths, and the previously orderly compound was rapidly transforming into a scene of disorder as an unseen adversary methodically selected targets with calculated precision. The third shot struck Sergeant Chen squarely in the chest, his protective vest absorbing the impact but the force hurling him backward through a nearby doorway.
Enemy convoy movement
The fourth round destroyed a radio operator's communication headset, narrowly missing his head by mere millimeters while obliterating the equipment and cutting off the base's connection to higher command. Major Briggs shouted desperately from his position behind an appended desk, his features displaying equal measures of fury and terror, demanding that someone locate the shooter. Kira was already in motion, maintaining a low profile while her tactical mind processed angles and trajectories as others were still comprehending the assault. She reached the concealed rifle container beneath her bunk, the one absent from all official records, the weapon she had been instructed to leave behind when transferring from her previous posting to accept this supposedly safer intelligence position. Major Briggs yelled at her, questioning her actions and ordering her to the protective bunker. She disregarded his commands, assembling her rifle with movements so ingrained they required no conscious thought. The custom 308 bolt action with its match-grade barrel and expensive Schmidt and Bender scope was the tool of an expert marksman, not someone assigned to examine satellite images and compose reports. The fifth shot destroyed another window pane. The sixth disabled a vehicle's tire, preventing the rapid response force from mobilizing. Kira quietly observed that the attacker was toying with them, demonstrating his ability to strike any target at will, employing psychological tactics before launching the primary assault. She repositioned to a window offering an unobstructed view of the nearby hills, remaining within shadows and minimizing her visible profile. Through her optical scope, the landscape revealed itself in distinct layers of ridgelines at varying distances, countless potential hiding positions from which an enemy marksman could dominate the entire installation. However, Kira Simmons was far from an ordinary intelligence officer. Prior to her reassignment to this remote forward operating base, she had served as an instructor at the Scout Sniper School in Quantico, spending 3 years educating Marine Corps snipers in the techniques of locating, fixing, and eliminating enemy sharpshooters. She had completed 2 combat deployments in an operational sniper capacity before that assignment, achieving 42 confirmed eliminations, though the precise number remained classified along with most of her actual service history. Her current posting resulted from embarrassing a general's son during a training evolution, articulating his incompetence in terms that were factually accurate but politically catastrophic. Her punishment consisted of this desk assignment analyzing intelligence documentation while her skills deteriorated and her weapon collected dust. Nevertheless, she had brought the rifle despite orders, continuing clandestine training during nighttime hours when observation was minimal, preserving her capabilities because her instincts suggested she would eventually need them. Those intuitions were proving correct at this very moment. The seventh shot rang out, and Kira's scope was already tracking the sound's origin. She identified a muzzle flash from the distant ridge, approximately 800 meters away, an amateur error. Professional marksmen suppressed their signatures, but this individual either lacked the proper equipment or didn't prioritize concealment. She announced her target acquisition, speaking primarily to herself. Briggs continued his protests, but her rifle responded with a suppressed shot barely perceptible amid the ongoing chaos. Through her optics, she observed a figure on the remote ridge jerk backward and tumble from his position. An eighth shot originated from a completely different direction, revealing multiple shooters rather than a single sniper. Kira's consciousness transitioned into combat mode, the mental state she had been trained to achieve and had trained countless others to reach. She became calm, analytical, and lethal. She began a methodical scan, searching for revealing indicators like unnatural shadows, scope reflection, or disturbed vegetation. She located the second position on the northern ridge at 900 meters, an elevated angle, partially obscured behind rock formations. The shooter had just fired and was operating his bolt action, confident that nobody within the base could threaten him at this distance. His confidence was misplaced. Kira made adjustments for distance, wind conditions, and the extreme angle. Her respiration slowed, her finger located the trigger's breaking point, and the crosshairs settled on a shape that appeared more shadow than substance. She fired, and the shape collapsed. She whispered confirmation of 2 eliminations while questioning how many remained. A 9th shot provided her answer, originating from yet another location. At least 3 enemy snipers, possibly more, all positioned to establish overlapping firing zones that transformed the forward operating base into a lethal trap. This wasn't random harassment but rather a coordinated assault designed to pin down American forces while additional events unfolded. Kira called out to the Major, still scanning through her scope, explaining that this constituted a fixing action meant to keep them suppressed while another force maneuvered into position. They needed to eliminate these snipers immediately or face a significantly larger problem. Briggs challenged her authority, but she responded by identifying herself as someone who previously instructed Marine Corps Scout snipers in precisely these techniques. She located the third shooter on the western ridge at approximately 700 meters, concealed behind a natural rock formation providing excellent cover. She posed a direct question about whether he wanted to debate her credentials or have her prevent these attackers from killing his personnel. Briggs attempted to respond but fell silent as another bullet passed within inches of him. He authorized her to proceed with eliminating all hostile forces. Kira allowed herself a grim smile, expressing satisfaction as she adjusted her position. To achieve better angles on the western ridge, the enemy sniper there demonstrated skill, barely exposing himself and utilizing the rock formation to maximum advantage. However, proficiency proved insufficient when confronting someone who had spent 3 years instructing the finest marksmen in the United States military on improvement techniques. She observed him for 30 seconds, learning his pattern. He would rise slightly to acquire targets, fire, then drop back into cover, a professional technique that became predictable once the rhythm was understood. She waited patiently for the right moment. When he rose, her crosshairs were already positioned, leading him by a fraction. She fired the instant his head cleared the rocks, achieving her third confirmed elimination. The enemy forces were adapting. The remaining snipers, whatever their number, had ceased firing and gone to ground. They recognized that someone was returning fire, someone capable of reaching out to 8 and 900 meters and achieving kills under conditions that would challenge most marksmen. The base had fallen silent, everyone frozen in whatever cover they had located, waiting to observe subsequent developments. Kira utilized the silence for tactical thinking. Multiple enemy snipers executing a coordinated attack as a fixing action to prevent response to another threat raised questions about the primary objective. Why target this particular forward operating base? Then she detected the distant sound of truck engines approaching from the east, where the base's defensive coverage was weakest due to assumptions about terrain being too difficult for vehicles. She urgently informed the Major about the approaching threat from the eastern direction, likely a vehicle-mounted assault while they remained pinned by the snipers. He needed to reposition the quick reaction force immediately. When he questioned her certainty, she explained that this matched her tactical expectations, that the snipers weren't the primary attack but rather the distraction, and that failure to move personnel would result in being overrun. For the first time since the engagement began, Briggs truly observed her, seeing beyond the intelligence officer he had been dismissing for 3 months. He recognized someone with prior experience, someone who understood how such attacks develop, someone who might be the only person in this forward operating base possessing the skills to ensure their survival. He transmitted orders over his radio for all units to prepare for vehicle assault on the eastern perimeter, with the quick reaction force establishing defensive positions as priority. Kira confirmed she would handle the snipers while requesting they keep hostile forces away from her position. She had eliminated 3 enemy shooters in under 5 minutes and now needed to locate and neutralize however many remained before they resumed killing Americans or before the vehicle assault reached the base. The pressure was significant. Kira Simmons had spent 3 years educating Marines on winning sniper engagements. Now she was about to demonstrate that she remained superior to any of her former students. The enemy snipers in those hills were about to discover why one shouldn't initiate conflicts with Scout Sniper School instructors, even those who had been relegated to desk assignments, particularly those who had been relegated to desk assignments, because they possessed something to prove. 30 minutes earlier, the morning briefing had followed routine protocol, tediously and numbingly routine. Captain Kira Simmons occupied a rear position in the operations center, partially attentive to Major Briggs discussing patrol schedules and supply requisitions while she mentally calculated wind values and bullet trajectories for terrain visible through the window, old habits proving difficult to abandon. Briggs questioned whether she was paying attention, his reddened face suggesting he had asked a question she hadn't heard. She confirmed her attention, mentioning patrol routes, supply convoys, and intelligence updates on enemy activity in the northern sector. He specifically asked about the intelligence update and what information she had. Kira accessed her tablet, displaying analysis she had completed at 4 in the morning while everyone else slept. Enemy activity had increased 47% in the northern hills over the previous 2 weeks. Radio intercepts suggested planning for some operation, though the communications remained vague, possibly indicating another harassment attack or something more coordinated. When asked for her assessment, she stated her belief that they were probing defenses and searching for weaknesses, with patterns suggesting they were building toward a larger operation, possibly within the next 72 hours.
Enemy convoy movement
Briggs dismissed this with a wave, noting they had been building toward something for 3 months with nothing materializing. He characterized these Taliban fighters as disorganized, poorly equipped, and not presenting serious threats to the base. Kira suppressed the response she wanted to articulate, that underestimating adversaries resulted in casualties, that disorganized fighters had been killing Americans for 2 decades, that her analysis derived from patterns she had observed in combat situations that Briggs had only encountered in written reports. Instead, she simply acknowledged his authority and stated she was reporting what the data indicated. He characterized the data as showing unsophisticated fighters playing at warfare in the hills, instructing her to notify him when they performed actions warranting concern. The briefing continued while Kira returned to her mental calculations, examining the hills surrounding the base and automatically identifying optimal sniper positions, ideal firing locations, and routes enemy forces might utilize for concealed approach.
Deploy the drones.
Lieutenant Morrison caught her attention from across the room with a commiserating eye roll. He was among the few personnel on the base aware of Kira's actual background, having served with her during her initial deployment before she became an instructor, when she was simply another Marine Scout Sniper performing hazardous work in hazardous locations. Following the briefing, Morrison intercepted her outside, characterizing the commanding officer as an idiot. She reminded him of the Major's position. He maintained his assessment while acknowledging her analysis as solid, noting he had observed identical patterns and that something was developing. She responded that his opinion was irrelevant if he wouldn't listen. She gazed at the hills again, experiencing that familiar sensation between her shoulder blades that accompanied feeling observed. Morrison confirmed he shared the sensation, comparing it to standing exposed before an approaching storm. They remained in silence momentarily, 2 combat veterans interpreting signs that non-combat officers around them couldn't perceive. Morrison quietly inquired whether she still possessed that rifle. She questioned why she would have a rifle, identifying herself as an intelligence officer who analyzes data and composes reports, nothing more. He expressed certainty that the rifle case beneath her bunk contained field manuals and presentation materials. Kira smiled slightly, characterizing it as something like that. He advised keeping it accessible, expressing negative premonitions about the day. Morrison departed toward his quarters while Kira remained outside, studying the hills, her trained perception identifying terrain features and potential threats that most people would never notice. She had been forcibly transferred to this forward operating base as punishment for being correct at an inopportune moment, for publicly demonstrating that the commanding general's son was an incompetent sniper who would cause casualties if deployed operationally.
Deploy the drones.
The general had experienced embarrassment, his son had expressed anger, and Kira had been reassigned to this remote location to languish behind a desk. However, she had maintained her skills sharp through night shooting sessions when everyone else slept, physical training exceeding minimum requirements, and mental exercises running through scenarios, staying prepared despite having no official reason for readiness. She had learned through combat that the universe possessed a sense of humor, and the moment one lowered their guard was precisely when everything deteriorated. She returned to her quarters, verified her rifle case to ensure everything was properly arranged, then reported to the operations center to begin her shift analyzing intelligence reports. 3 hours later, the first bullet penetrated the window, and Kira Simmons transformed from an intelligence officer who wrote reports into the combat-hardened sniper instructor who had been waiting for an opportunity to prove she still possessed the skills that had made her among the finest in the Marine Corps.